So hello everybody to this new episode of the Robustly Beneficial podcast. So today we're going to discuss a paper that came out in Nature in last April, so a few months ago, called A Mountable Toilet System for Personalized Health Monitoring via the Analysis of Excreta. As a rephrasing, you could just call it smart toilets. It's a paper basically about like installing a system in your toilets to collect data, different kind of data. So there are data about some measures of chemicals in your pee, uh, in your urine. Sorry, searching for the technical term for it, and like pH or stuff like this, like the different measures like this. And there are also things that are arguably a bit more creepy, like essentially you have a camera that takes pictures and that maybe even films what's going on. In particular, the uroflowmetry, something like how fast your urine goes, and other things like it takes pictures of what's inside your toilet once you've done, and as well measures of how much time you spend in the toilet. So different measures like that to monitor what's going on when you're inside the toilets.
Actually, the interest for this topic is has two motives: before COVID and after COVID. So let's maybe talk about after COVID. So in the early days of COVID, many scientists, I have a friend. He's a professor of epidemiology, and he was very proactive in promoting group testing. So the idea of, instead of doing individual tests on people, which might not scale, you can do group testing and infer groups where COVID is present, and then isolate the groups that are positive and start going fine-grained. A very good method to do group testing is through sewage sewage testing. So you look at the wastewater from neighborhoods, which is just another proxy to do group testing on people. And empirical results showed that it's a very efficient way to have advanced information in advance about whether COVID is present or not in an area. And instead of doing large-scale lockdown of big cities, you would start narrowing it down to neighborhoods and streets, or depending on the granularity of where you do sewage testing. Unfortunately, you can do it like in the level of a street, but you can narrow it down to big neighborhoods where you have some central sewage collection, etc. So that's the COVID motivation for looking at how we could use data from sewage, feces, urine, etc. The other motivation is that Lei is writing a book.
Yeah. So I've started to write like it would be a graphical novel of science fiction. So yeah, I'm doing a bit of science fiction, but it's like very realistic quite realistic science fiction. And it would be like the story of a company that develops smart toilets to collect data about different individuals and to do medical diagnosis. So that's essentially the idea of the Nature paper. What's amusing is that I was working on this idea, like I've been thinking about this idea for a year, and I've even started to work a little bit on this last December. And this paper just came out 3 months ago. So while I was thinking about these things, so it's quite funny that I guess this is like in the air of time. Like more and more people are probably thinking about this possibility. And I think it's very, very interesting because the opportunities are huge. So as Mehdi said, there's a lot of opportunities in terms of diagnosing like disease like COVID-19. You can even think of simpler things like diarrhea, for instance. And if you can detect this, you can then take measures. You can tell people, well, these days in your neighborhood, there's a lot of cases, so be careful, like increase hygiene, wash your hands, take social distance, physical distancing measures and stuff like this, and this can reduce the spread of the virus and ultimately save lives, or at least reduce the number of sick people suffering. So the opportunities are big, and we can even think, if we collect more and more data like this, that we may be able to detect things that we have no idea yet that we could be detecting, because as far as I know, there's not a big database of excreta somewhere, and definitely not a labeled set of such data. So if you can somehow connect the excrements of an individual with the disease that he's having, by, for instance, talking with the doctors and finding these kinds of connections, then maybe we can find new diagnoses of deficiencies in vitamins, of this or that vitamin, or maybe diagnose the need to reduce that kind of consumption. And this can be personalized, and this is highly targeted, and as such, it can be a lot more efficient than general principles such as you should eat more vegetables. Yeah, so maybe you can quickly discuss a bit of the paper. The idea of the paper is to have this system, so they have this whole system that can be plugged into any toilet. So you're not buying the whole toilet, you're just adding these measurement tools to your current toilets. And they made sure that the whole system was not too costly, but I think it's still quite costly. Yeah, and this allowed them to gather quite a few data. So it's more like a proof of concept, a prototype for future developments. And I think we're really here, like we are at the beginning of potentially some exciting development in terms of poop and pee analysis. But as you said, this is like more the scientific approach of this. But there are already we checked this when we were discussing this.
Actually, there are ways to speed up the deployment of proto versions of this technology, which can be only like photo based, and there are already apps. So we checked that there are existing apps where you can just take a photo and then from.
So actually, I didn't see any app where you actually take a picture. Like most apps that I've seen, you document yourself, like they show you images of poop, and you have to choose which one looks like yours.
Okay, you have to label it yourself.
Yeah, but there's not even like the raw data. Like there's not like so like you cannot do machine learning on this, because, well, you can do machine learning, but it's like very simplified data. Whereas if you have an app where you actually take a picture of your poop, and maybe you can even take the picture without looking at it if you don't like looking at it. Then by doing so, you can collect a larger database, and yeah. Like during the COVID situation, like there were quite a few people saying that look, machine learning AI is like, we make a big fuss of it, but there's not any real application of AI for the COVID situation. And we already made a podcast on an episode on this podcast on like AI applied to COVID. But I saw there's actually a paper that came out yesterday or something like this about using machine learning techniques to do diagnosis, but based on other kinds of data. But the critical thing about machine learning is that it's useless if you don't have any data. Like machine learning and AI, so like these are all algorithms, and algorithms are information processing tools. So if you don't have any information to process, then you don't. If you have shitty information to process, like very bad information, like unreliable data, then same problem. Like you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So algorithms are going to be useless. But if you now you collect data carefully, you label them carefully, and you have a big data set with lots of data that a human cannot analyze alone, then now you can do machine learning on this, and now you're probably going to find things that you could not find without machine learning techniques. And this is where things gets exciting. But before getting to this, we need this prior phase of data collection. So typically an app that takes pictures of what comes out of you.
So yeah, this sounds futuristic and far-fetched, maybe for people who didn't take time to think about the problem. But yeah, as we said in the beginning, that like there are like strong arguments in terms of public health for deploying this kind of techniques, at least in a coarse-grained level, not an individual level. So as for example, the sewage analysis for to detect epidemics, etc. But you can also discuss the challenges that this does not came without also like challenges we did not think of in the beginning, like just the usual ones: privacy, security, etc. If you want to develop,
Yeah.
we discussed that a lot during the reading session.
Yeah, and that's actually why I'm excited about the book I'm writing. I think it can be very funny. Like it's going to be written in a very casual manner, like it's a graphical novel. Like the point is to be very understandable for everyone. But at the same time, the real goal of the book would be to highlight the big questions in the ethics of algorithms. What I think are the biggest questions in the ethics of algorithms. Of course, these include like the basic ones, like or the ones we've all heard of, and definitely when you're thinking about taking pictures of your poop, like immediately, at least the people I've talked to, immediately think of the privacy concerns, and of course, there are huge privacy concerns. These would be like personalized medical data.
Yeah, there is a market. So we just searched that last week. There's a market for medical data so there's a black market for medical data. Its value is higher than so we think it was like financial data or
yeah. So it's really a big deal, like these data, and you want to protect them. And also, I think it's important to stress that this is not individual data only. Like I think just the notion of personal data, which is the one used, for instance, in GDPR, the general regulation for personal data, I think it was. We often talk about personal data as though it was only about you, like your data were only about you. But for instance, if you think of genetic data, well, your genetic data is not only about you.
you can know a vulnerability in the health of the presidents of the United States just because, I don't know, the brother or the cousin of the presidents of the United States left some saliva or left some saliva or some I don't know,
Yeah.
piece of hair or piece of skin in a place, and then with that you can infer that the president of the United States has this or that particular genetic disease or vulnerability, and then you can target them. So which is scary. So you can disclose information about your cousins, your family, your parents, your brothers, your kids. It's not only about you. Yes.
Yeah. And so this is genetic data, in which case is kind of like more obvious, I'd say. But even like in smart toilet applications, you can think of if you have very contagious diseases, and if like two of people living in your own home have this disease, then people like are going to infer that you probably have this disease too. So like you always like you're never alone in this, and just like the idea of ownership of data can be complicated because of this, because maybe even if you own your data, you also have the responsibility of all the people that whose privacy may be violated if you share this data publicly. So yeah, I think these are interesting things to think about, but there are other issues, perhaps less direct issues of these kinds of applications. So you can imagine, like, if you just share the raw data to the user, like, so, well, probably the user is not going to want to look at the picture of his poop, for instance. So probably you're going to do some information processing. Typically, you're going to search for disease, like you're trying to diagnose disease or stuff like this, and then you're going to show some information to the user. And this information, you're probably going to train it based on a lot of data you've collected. For instance, like based on all of the data I've collected, I diagnose something, and I tell you that I've diagnosed this. But then you have this these bias issues that we've discussed in the previous episode. This may happen here as well. Like, for instance, if the first users of this kind of application are like, let's say they are white males, for instance, then the excrements of these people may have characteristics that only apply to these people. So maybe if you detect some anomaly in a poop, it will be an anomaly with respect to white male poop. So if the app is mostly used by this group of people and sometimes used by another group of people, then for this other group of people, maybe their poop is going to be systematically classified as an anomaly, and then you can have a lot of
or like not detecting something.
Yeah.
Not detecting an alert where the person or she or he should have been alerted.
Yeah, so that's another challenge. Like, how do you make sure you are robust to what we call a distributional shift? The fact that the training data, the distribution of the training data, is not the same as the distribution of the use cases. Yeah, so that's one problem. There are many more problems. Like, for instance, one more problem you can think of is if you want to have this private machine learning system. So we like, there are more and more papers building these systems around the concept of federated learning, for instance, where you want to protect the privacy of the data, but you extracting out of this data using, for instance, differential privacy or using homomorphic encryption techniques. You still enable machine learning without violating the privacy of the data. And quite often the trouble with these algorithms is that they are vulnerable to malicious users. So you can imagine a malicious user that inject false data, maybe because he's it's the rival competition of the company. Maybe you can imagine you have trolls, and because of this, these people are going to inject a lot of false data of what in the book I will call fake poop. And if you're learning mostly from fake poop, then you're going to learn very bad things. And maybe even these malicious users can make sure that, for instance, you're going to alert all of your users that they have cancer or whatever.
Data cleaning would have a very interesting meaning.
Yeah. And this can be like very serious problem, because if you imagine that one big country is using a lot of this system, then there can be strong incentives for rival or enemy groups, not necessarily countries, but even groups, like terrorist attacks, to just do this kind of fake poop attack at scale.
Like, people who didn't spend as much time as you thinking about this problem. Like, we spent a lot of coffee breaks discussing this. Natural, but you have to take time. Like, it's not as far-fetched as it sounds.
Yeah.
So maybe like you can explain it more in details.
Yeah.
How much harm you can do with this.
Yeah, so you can imagine that most people use this system and gain trust in the system. So they really, like, if the app tells them that they have a deficiency in vitamin A, then maybe people will eat carrots. Like, and if the app says, well, you should eat carrots to protect against this deficiency, maybe people will be doing this. And if this app now has 100,000, a million, or 100 millions of users, which is what happened, for instance, for social medias, then having this kind of power gets is going to be very impactful. You can imagine the lobby of carrots, for instance, that wants to sell more carrots or create a scarcity for carrots so that they can increase the price of carrots. Then maybe they can just find ways to hack the app by creating this fake poop, like for instance, all of this poop, which so you can imagine fake poop, which are normal poops, but they are labeled like deficiency, like huge deficiency in vitamin A. And if the attackers are motivated, if they create this attack where they create millions of accounts or hundreds of millions of accounts that each send poop that looks like this, then the app, which is not going to be able to distinguish the authentic user from these malicious users, this app will just see a lot of data that says that, well, these poops that look normal, actually they reveal a deficiency in vitamin A. Then the app is going to recommend more carrots to most people, because it's learned that like normal poop is associated with a deficiency in vitamin A. And soon enough, like maybe a lot more people will be buying carrots, and the price of carrots is going to increase because there's going to be scarcity. And so you can imagine that there is going to be a lot of malicious actors that will have all sorts of incentives to manipulate the system like this using fake poop. And this, by the way, is what is happening on social media. Like all of these companies have realized that Facebook, Google, and everything, they have a huge influence on billions of lives through what they recommend. And if like the carrot lobby can somehow find ways to make sure that Google is going to show more ads of carrots now and then at a low price for the advertiser, then they're going to try to jump on this opportunity because there's big money at stake.
Yes. Now it sounds less far-fetched.
Yeah, hopefully it sounds less far-fetched. I can tell that just the end of the book. I'm spoiling a little bit the book, but I guess I'm teasing it rather than spoiling it. But really, the end of the book is the realization. So there's a bit of story about like people using the app and then asking questions to the app. And so the company creating a chatbot to answer like the basic questions at least. But then the company finds out that most of the questions are more like psychological questions. Like, should I be worried about X? What if, like, should I prepare a plan for X? I feel scared. What should I do? And then the app realizes, well, the company realizes that probably the biggest health issue these days, or arguably increasingly, is mental health changes, because it affects a huge proportion of the population and creates a lot of suffering, even leading to deaths in some tragic cases. And so the app is going to try to work on mental health issues. And I think this is similarly something that is already happening for social medias. They already have this ability to gather data about the mental health of people better than anybody else could. And they're also in a position where they could actually act, for instance, by suggesting videos that recommend users to go see a psychiatrist, for instance. And overall, like the end of the book is really about like the importance of just attention and recommendation. Because the reason why this company, well, spoiler alert, in the end of the book, it's like the biggest company in the world. And the reason why it becomes so is because it has people's attention. And the reason why today Google is so important is that Google has people's attention. People go to Google, they click on what Google proposes, they listen to Google. The reason why YouTube is influential is the same reason. And because these companies have people's attention, they can recommend things to these people. And these recommendations are extremely powerful. Like each recommendation is a small thing, but if you multiply this day after day for an individual over his lifetime, half an hour per day in the case of YouTube, 2 hours per day in the case of the comic of the Smart Toilet Company in my science fiction book. Because of this attention time, they have huge power. They can change what people believe, and they can change what people like and enjoy because of well-known psychological features of the human brain. And so the big question is like, yeah, we have this power now. What should we do about this? How do we make sure we make robustly beneficial recommendations? Even like medical recommendations, it's not easy to make them robustly beneficial, especially when it's about mental health. So yeah, that's the book. It's probably going to take at least another year, if not two, to be written, drawn, and so on. But I'm very excited about this project.
Okay, so with that, I think we can wrap up because Louis is waiting for the recording of another podcast.
So next week we're going to discuss unsupervised translation of programming languages, which is a paper that came out of from researchers at Facebook. And it's like a new, quite remarkable algorithm that's able to translate the codes written in Python into codes in C++ and vice versa, and also Java and stuff like this. And we're also going to discuss like potentially like what can we imagine for the future developments of this kind of technology. So I hope you stay tuned and see you.